All right, hello. I'm Krzysztof Drewniak from AMD, and I'm here to discuss non-attribute properties in MLIR and some of the improvements that have been made to that infrastructure over the last year and change. Hold on, there we go. So I'll begin this with a little bit of history and context about properties and attributes in MLIR. Namely, when you're defining an operation in MLIR, you have several options for how to associate the constants and data and flags and such with that operation. The traditional method is to use attributes, which end up being these like immutable values that live in the MLIR context forever, and you basically store a pointer to an attribute that's like an integer or a Boolean, this unit attribute, or what have you, in your operation, and you've got these guys of immutable independent entities. But you can also use non-attribute properties, where that's just you put your data mutably directly inside your operation. So to give sort of the big piece of background, in the very early days of MLIR, all this sort of associated data was stored in attributes, and whether or not the attribute was part of the operation definition or not, you would be storing it into a dictionary of attributes, and you'd unique that, was itself an attribute, you'd store a pointer to that in your operation. And this meant updating any kind of constant whatsoever was super slow because you had to rehash the entire dictionary. So several years ago, the change was made to add a properties struct to operations, where you would embed, you'd basically allow these inherent attributes to live directly inside the operation. You should only store pointers to them. And then you would instead go, and only the discardable tags would live in the dictionary the old-fashioned way. This is a nice improvement, but there's no reason to actually only store attributes in that property struct. You could store any kind of data you'd like. And as sort of seen in this example, you could just put your integer length or your isBar flag kind of directly as C++ data in the operation, and now you don't have to go through all this uniquing stuff, and you get a lot of performance that way. But this mechanism has been theoretically present ever since the beginning, but it's been quite underused due to the very lacking infrastructure around these non-attribute properties. That infrastructure has been improved substantially, as I will now detail. Firstly, these non-attribute properties, like this sort of I64 prop, now work with the normal TableGen system for parsers and printers. You can just use them in your assembly format the way you would your attributes. It used to be you had to do a custom parser and a printer, and this was not a great setup. Similarly, we will now automatically generate IR builders for these kinds of properties, taking sort of the relevant C++ interface types and even handling default values for optional properties and such correctly. And there's been several other improvements, such as the various kind of property combinators. You can now do optional properties, you can do array properties, you can so on and so forth, and you can even do sort of constraints on properties so you get an attributes of a prop constraint. And similarly, enum generation has been decoupled from attribute generation, so now you can just do a I32 enum and then make an enum prop out of it. And so now you no longer would have to go through and make unique hash values for your 5 enum cases and look those up every single time, which I think is a substantial improvement. And for those that use the declarative rewrite rules mechanism, that also now supports non-attribute properties, and that will no longer crash your rewrite generation. And this is still something of a work in progress. There's still future work here. For one, the kind of generic forms of builders still always have to scan the attribute dictionary to make sure there's not any inherent attributes hiding in there. We sort of might want to add a general method for that. And there's a big question around how to handle these sorts of properties, which are always just C++ data. In FFI, there's been proposals for generic sort of propref and own-in propref, and sort of a string-based generic parser and printer for these properties. But there hasn't been concrete movement on that. There's still ongoing discussion, and I'd like to sort of invite kind of further opinions, online, etc. Maybe or people's spare bandwidth to kind of take this all over the finish line. Thank you for your time and your attention.